One of the things I pointed out at that time was this bill, in part at least, was based on achieving savings of $30 million to the remainder of this fiscal year, which ends on June 30th. $30 million worth of savings, which would be effective because of starting the pension and health care contributions that I and other state employees would make, my cabinet would make, the legislature would make, others would make, effective April 1st. That's the equivalent of $30 million worth of savings. I mentioned at that time 3 weeks ago, and I believe that the Senate Democrats know this full well, that if we do not get to have those savings effective April 1st, I mentioned back then, and it still is true today, that the alternative is to find some $30 million of savings elsewhere, and that's the equivalent of 1,500 layoffs. 1,500 layoffs, which I've said all along is unacceptable. This tough economic times, the last thing I want is anybody laid off, let alone an additional 1,500 state workers. But they also know that those savings are based on those layoffs beginning the first week of April. And day after day, I talked about being cautiously optimistic and held out some hope because we've had some glimmers of hope that some of the more reasonable and responsible members of the Senate were interested in coming back home. But ultimately, they know that if we don't have a sign, if we don't action by tomorrow, we have a legal as well as a moral obligation to send out notification to the unions foretelling that beginning the first week of April, 1,500 state employees will have to be laid off for the equivalent of $30 million worth of savings. Now, I hope we can find some way. We've extended plenty of offers, plenty of options, plenty of ways for at least some, if not all, those 14 state senators to come back home.